Hello, Lizzie here. Today I'm going to show you how to make this gorgeous tote bag. And from first glance you think, oh, that's pretty ordinary. But actually, if we turn it through, you'll be able to see that actually it's got pockets. And it's kind of fully reversible really. So this is like the inside, which could be the outside. And there we are, that's how it looks. So it's got a double pocket here at the front, and I've got a stitch going down the centre of that, and at the back we've got one big pocket. So if this was on the inside of the bag, you can put your device in there, you know, your iPad, that sort of thing. So it really makes quite an interesting bag that you can change it as you wish. You can have the pretty on the outside or the pretty on the inside. So this is how we're going to do it. So I've got all my pieces ready cut out. Now, if you want the instructions and all the dimensions, just click the little triangle just down here on the right hand side of your screen. It'll drop down all the description, and down there we'll have all the measurements that you need to make this bag. Because it's quite different in as much that the lining has the folds to make the pockets, and we've got trimmings and we've got straps as well. So I will show you techniques, but if you need the dimensions, look below. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually to put the pretty strips, if you like, the binding strips, it's not bias, it's just straight binding, onto the pockets. Okay, so let's just get our pretty fabric out of the way, which, as you know, can be your lining or your outer. So what I've done is I've cut my piece, and I've actually already folded it up by 6.5 inches. So that's my piece of calico. You can use whatever you wish. Nice and strong though, because it's going to take some weight with your shopping. And I've folded that up 6.5 inches, so we've got a nice crease line down here. Now we are actually going to stitch along there right at the very end, so don't be worried that how does that fold work. I'll show you as we go along. So all you need to do is cut yourself a strip 2.5 inches wide and the width of your bag, which is 15 inches. And then all you need to do is to actually attach this to each side of your calico. So let's put one to one side and the strip as well. I'll bring in my machine and we'll attach that. Now I've already pressed the seams in, so this is my 2.5 inch strip, and I've pressed those seams in so they meet in the middle to make a nice neat binding edge like that. So with calico, obviously you know that it doesn't matter which side is the right side or the wrong side, and I'm going to do it the traditional way. I'm opening up my strip and I'm going to stitch in the fold, the crease if you like, of the binding. Now just increase my stitch length just so we can go a bit faster. So I'll do one and then we'll take a break and I'll do the other. So just right up to the end. No need to do a locking stitch because these ends of seams are going to be tucked in the next seam when we actually stitch the bag together. So all you're going to do now is just literally, that's what we've just stitched, just there, and this is going to be folded over just like you would with binding. And then you're going to top stitch that. And that's the first stage done. So all I've done now is, if we have a look at it, I'll fold that back down, but we've made one of the pockets and we've neatened that edge off beautifully with that lovely pretty fabric. So just before I go ahead and do the other one, I want to put a pocket, sort of a seam right in the middle, and that will give me those two pockets that we saw before. So it's just a seam going down there. So the easiest way to do that is to actually fold this whole thing in half, give it a finger press. The heat of your fingers will do that nicely. Open it up and you'll find that you have a beautiful crease line going across there. So all you have to do now is actually stitch along there. So this is perfect for a beginner. We're not doing much measuring at all. So a little back stitch there just to make sure the stitches are held and also to give it nice security. So if you do fill the pockets with things, they're not going to split. So we'll just trim our threads. Keep it all nice and neat. Now it needs a good press as well. Just trim that edge off. There we go. So there's our pocket done. Okay, ready to stitch into the bag. Now, the next one is exactly the same, but I haven't stitched up the middle. So I'll do that and come back to you. So I've stitched that binding fabric in place now, and as you can see it's a lovely big pocket going across the front there, and I've also stay stitched up the side, and all that means is that I've actually just caught those layers down where I've folded this pocket over. So stay stitching is just regular stitching, but about 1/8 of an inch in from the raw edge, and that's just to hold that in place so it's not going to wriggle, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's the inside done, or the outside depending on what you feel about the bag. So you've got 2 pockets here in one of the pieces and 1 big pocket in the other piece. So the next thing we need to do is the straps. Now the straps are 4 inches by 30 and I've got 2 of those. And what I've done is, just to prepare earlier, I have actually folded these in half and folded again, which gives me a 1-inch strap. So when we look at it, there is the width of the fabric there. Let's get that straight so you can see. So there's my width of my fabric, but what I've done is I've folded in those edges to the middle, okay, like that, and then I have folded them again like that. And what that gives me, first of all, it gives me a nice strong strap, and that's perfectly acceptable, and that's 1 inch wide, so it does take a lot of hardware if you ever wanted to use some hardware. But also you've got 2 very lovely neat folded edges there. So all I'm going to do now is top stitch up one edge and top stitch up the other using a longer stitch. I tend to use 3, so I'll do one and then we'll go in and I'll do the other. So I'll just bring my machine in now and we'll just stitch up that strap. So we're going to stitch up both folded sides. I've got my stitch length on 3 still, and I'm literally going to whiz up both sides. So there's one strap done. Just trim my thread so it's nice and neat. There we go. So I'm now going to stitch the other one. So while I stitch that, have a look at this. You can find access to my Gold Club from my website. Sign up and you can connect to my Facebook Live events and join in all the fun my Gold Club members have on a weekly basis. And of course you get free patterns. See my Gold Club video on YouTube for more information. Right, so I've stitched both straps. Now we need to place them onto the bag. So I think it's easier to put it on the lining or the calico, whichever you decide to use. And you need to put them in 2.5 inches from each side. So from each end, 2.5 inches, thereabouts. Don't get too stressed if it's not absolutely perfect. And put the strap in the middle of that 2.5 inches. Okay, so I can see that, I can look overhead. Because this is 1 inch, this is going to go between the 2 and the 3 on my tape measure, so it's actually quite easy to line up. And all I'm going to do is put a little quilt clip in there. You can use pins if you want to. I prefer to use quilting clips where I can. I do feel they're a little bit safer. So just make sure your strap isn't twisted, and then 2.5 inches again from the edge. Again, you're putting your strap right in the centre of that. So there we go. And just clip that in place. And just to make sure you're in the right place, it should measure 2 inches from each edge of your strap. So that's one done. Let's move that out of the way. So this is the other one. So again, 2.5 inches, pop your strap over the top and use your clip or your pins to hold, and then 2.5 inches from this end. Make sure your strap isn't twisted. So what we're going to do now is actually stay stitch those in place, just to make sure they're held fast and that we don't need to worry about them. So we're not going to have pins or clips getting in the way when we're stitching this together. So I'm bringing my machine in and I'm literally going to stay stitch. And actually what I'll do is I'll start stay stitching here, so it's about 1/8 of an inch in, and I'm just going to carry on all the way down, the same for the other one. And then you know they're secure and in place, which is great. The thing, it sort of eliminates the use of pins and, like I say, getting them in the way. So you're just going straight over the top and then straight on. You can use a longer stitch here if you want to. It's just a case of keeping everything in place. So there's one, and here's two. So I'll quickly do that. And again, if you want to break your threads off because you're concerned about using thread where you don't need to, then obviously that's fine. But sometimes I find this a lot quicker just to carry on. And also there's not so much trimming of threads as well. So let's pop my clips there. So there we are. So there's our lining done with the straps in place, the pockets done. So now we're ready to put this bag together. So all you need to do is stitch the lining together, but leave a turning gap, and you're leaving the turning gap on the side, on one of the sides, not on the folded edge. It's just easier. So from just beyond that pocket, about ½ inch, about 4 or 5 inches turning gap. So that's what you're going to do now. So right sides together. And I'll do my turning gap on that very last seam. And even though you've got a folded edge, which is nice and neat on the bottom here, you're still stitching along. So I'm doing about 1/4 inch. I'm doing a back stitch as well, just for security, because in a moment we'll put the two pieces together and you want that strength. Just coming to that last seam now, so we must remember to leave that turning gap. So just beyond the pretty binding of your pocket, so a little back stitch just to give it strength, whiz along, and like I said, I like about 4 inches. Start again with a back stitch that's nice and strong, and finish with a back stitch. So there we are, so we've gone all the way around that, and now at last we get to put our pretty fabric together, and literally you're just going to stitch right sides together. Obviously one of these short sides is the top of the bag, so you don't want to stitch that. So we're going down the long side, across the short side and up the long side. Again, all the way around, you don't need a turning gap. Nice locking stitch. So I'm going to now whiz all the way around. I'll show you when I've finished. Right, just coming to the end now. Trim those threads. If you want to take some of the bulk from the corner off, then just chop across, but I don't think it's necessary. It's fine like this. So now you want to put right sides together. So at the moment we've got 2 wrong sides, so one of these needs to be turned through. And let's have a look at the pretty side, shall we? So nice. I do like the calico, a nice strong white natural seeded cotton. It's nice and strong. Right, so there's our pretty fabric, and let's just cut these threads here, and there's our calico. Now what you'll find, and I'll hold it up, you'll find that your calico is smaller than your pretty fabric, and I'm going to hold it and try and show it to you. Can you see it's longer at the top there with the pretty fabric by a couple of inches or so, and that's deliberate because it means that the pretty fabric then goes inside the bag, so when you turn it through, whichever way you use, you're seeing some of that pretty fabric. So there's our right side there, so we're going to pop that inside our calico piece. And again, this is where you can use pins or clips to hold the two together. The main thing is to get those side seams to touch. So if I put a clip in there, that holds them together, and then a clip in the other side, so this, you're matching up the side seams Be careful you don't match up the bags, the bag handles. That's not where you want it to go. So those side seams are now kind of attached to each other, so that'll all sort of come together. You don't really need any more clips or pins in there, but if you want to, just find the middle and just pop a clip in there if you want to. I'm a bit of a rebel when it comes to stitching. I sometimes don't have time for pins, and you could tack as well if you're being really good. So the whole of that top of that bag now is clipped together. We're just going to stitch all the way round. Don't forget we've got that turning gap, and that's where we're going to turn the bag through. So I'm going to take my table off just so I have a free arm facility, and that always helps. So if you've got that on your machine, then do that, because it means that the bag can sit nicely under your machine. It just fits in the gap. Let me just try and get that in there. There we go. So it fits nicely in there, kind of holds everything nice and straight. So again, back stitch to start, and then remove your clips as you go. If you're using pins, remove your pins. When you come to the stay stitching of where your straps are, and you'll be able to see it, you're just going to go on the other side of it to the left. So you won't see that stitching when you turn through. And once you've done this and turned it, it just needs a good press. Stitch the turning gap closed. I just run it under the machine, to be honest. You could hand stitch if you wish. There we go. And again, we're just looking for those straps and the stay stitching. Use that as your guide. About 1/4 of an inch. If you want to use 1/2 an inch all throughout, then that's fine. It just makes your bag just a little bit smaller. So just coming back to where we started, to make sure your straps are straight. Back stitch just to lock all those stitches in place. You can trim those threads if you want to. Just for speed, I won't do that. I will do it later. So all you're going to do now is turn this through. And I do suggest now giving it a really good press with your iron, especially because you've used this kind of calico and it can get a little bit creased. So there we are. Now we also need to top stitch, so I'll go through that in a second. I'm just going to get this so it's lining inside, which is never easy when you're in a hurry. There we go. Always looks a bit of a muddle when you first start doing it, but persevere. Just push everything in place, get those corners working for you, and once you press this, it'll always fit nicely back in place really well. At first it always wants to fight you a little bit. Right, let's just get my pocket in place there. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and give this a really good press, and then I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about the top stitching on the top and how we attach these straps a little bit further down into the bag. It's quite an important part of this process, so come back to me in just a second. Okay, so we're nearly there. I've top stitched my gap closed, so that's all been done. Just ran that under the machine. Hardly see it with that calico. The pockets are on both sides, so there's one set and there's the other set there. So when you turn through, make sure you get the pockets on both sides. And once you press it, you'll see that you have a lovely pretty fabric coming through on the lining, so it sort of gives that burst of colour. Now what you need to do is to top stitch these straps in place. So in other words, if I show you here that at the moment they are fairly loose, in other words they're attached obviously just here and here, so let me show you that and there, but really what you want to do now is just to run your machine across the top of this here and just catch those straps in place. Make sure they're nice and straight when you catch them, so you're literally going across here and catching those with a top stitch. So I'll do that now and then we're done. I'll leave my table on. Well, in fact, no, I'll take my table off. It's just so much easier. Doesn't really matter where you start, but perhaps at the side seam is a good idea. So I'm going about 1/8 of an inch. Don't really need to do a back stitch, that's habit. So you're doing about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the bag, and it just kind of holds everything in place. And when you get to the strap, make sure the strap is nice and straight. And I'll show you when I'm done. I've got my needle in the needle down position, and then we're just literally going around the top of the bag. And this, like I said, this will hold your pretty fabric in place. And it gives a nice professional finish. It doesn't take a minute to do. It's so worth it. Plus, it gives those straps extra stability and strength. So we've gone past that second side seam, straight across the third strap. Coming up to the last strap now, and literally straight across. And then just go over your first stitches by about 3 or 4 stitches, and that way you don't need to do a back stitch. Sometimes it can look quite ugly when you do a lot of back stitching, especially when you're top stitching. So just make sure your threads are trimmed back nicely. It's always worth spending a moment doing that. And I'll pick up all my threads later that I throw on the floor. There we go, that's all trimmed. So now if we have a look here, you'll be able to see that I've top stitched all the way along, making that really nice and neat, but also strengthening those straps beautifully. So there we are, there's our bag done, and if we wanted to, of course, we could have pretty side out, and why wouldn't we? So just turn it through. So I suppose it depends what you're shopping, you know, whether it's some vegetables you might put in there. I would use the calico side because that doesn't matter so much, does it, as your pretty fabric. Keep your pretty fabric perhaps when you're going shopping for, I don't know, some nice girly things. So there we are. So there is the medium-sized tote bag with the pockets inside or the pockets on the outside. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.